Deep under the shining towers of Cernak City, there was a secret the world never talked about. A metal door, rusted with age, sat hidden beneath layers of concrete and shadow. Behind it, in a cage of cold steel and silence, lived a creature the Council had called X-13. To them, it was not alive. It was a mistake, a beast, a threat. It had been captured years ago during the war, locked away, never released. Guards rarely came near it. Scientists gave up studying it. It had no name, no voice, and no hope. Until the day a young human medic stepped into the darkness with a bag in his hand. His name was Elias Brandt. He was not a soldier, not a fighter. He came to clean bloodstains and check on prisoners the Council wanted forgotten. But when he entered the lower levels, something felt wrong. There was no noise, no breathing, no machines, just a heavy silence. He walked past shattered glass, burned floors, and old warning signs. Then he reached the cage, and he froze. The creature was massive, covered in thick black fur matted with dirt and dried blood. Its arms were chained, its legs bound, but its glowing yellow eyes watched him carefully. It did not growl. It did not move. It just stared. Elias swallowed hard. "This is X-13?" he whispered. A soldier behind him nodded. "Yeah, thing's still breathing somehow." "Why keep it alive?" Elias asked. "Orders." The soldier shrugged. "Execution in 3 days." Then the soldier turned and left, leaving Elias. Alone, Elias stepped closer, gripping the food bag tightly. He tossed a piece of bread into the cage. The creature didn't pounce or roar. Instead, it looked down at the bread, slowly reached for it with trembling fingers, and gently picked it up. It sniffed once, then took a small bite, chewed, swallowed, then looked back at Elias. Elias blinked, confused. "That's not what I expected," he said. The creature made no sound, but there was something in its eyes. Not hunger, not rage. Something else. Sadness. Maybe. Understanding. He came back the next day, even though he wasn't ordered to. This time he brought warm soup and a blanket. He sat outside the cage, speaking softly. "I don't know why they locked you here," Elias said. "But you don't look like a monster to me." The creature sat silently, watching him with tired eyes. When Elias stood to leave, the creature dragged its chained hand across the dirt floor. It drew a shape, a circle, with a line through it. Elias frowned. "What does that mean?" The creature tapped the symbol again, then pointed at itself. "Is that your name?" Elias asked. It tapped once. Elias looked down at the symbol again. "Vor," he said slowly, guessing. The creature blinked, then nodded. Elias took a deep breath, his hands shaking. "You understand me?" he whispered. Vor lowered his head gently. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. In the morning, he read the Council files. They claimed X-13 was non-sentient, dangerous, uncontrollable. They said it killed 3 researchers during capture. But there were no images, no recordings, just words, and all of them cold, empty, full of fear. Elias returned on the 3rd day, the last day before execution. He brought more food, and this time a small chalk stick. He slid it through the bars. "Write something," he said, heart pounding. Vor hesitated, then slowly wrote in broken, jagged letters. "No, kill me." Elias stared at the words. This was not a beast. This was someone. He turned and looked at the camera in the corner. It blinked red, always watching. He spoke quietly. "I don't know what you are, Vor, but I promise I'll come back." That night, Elias submitted a request to delay the execution. The AI system rejected it within seconds. "No valid reason," the message read. The Council wanted X-13 gone, buried, forgotten, but Elias couldn't forget those eyes. He couldn't forget the word. Friend, written with trembling fingers. In the shadows of the cage beneath the city, a spark had lit. A spark of connection, of understanding. And that spark, small as it was enough to start a fire, because for the first time in years, Vor wasn't alone. And for the first time in his life, Elias was ready to break the rules. The next night, Elias came back even though he wasn't supposed to. He walked softly, carrying a thermal container filled with hot stew, a few soft rolls, and a cloth napkin. His heart was pounding, and every echo of his boots made him glance over his shoulder. The halls were empty, the air heavy with the scent of old metal and wet stone. He reached the cage, and once again, Vor was waiting. The creature didn't growl or move suddenly. Instead, it sat still as if it had been awake all night listening. Elias knelt outside the bars and placed the food gently on the floor. "Dinner," he said quietly, sliding the container through a gap in the cage. Vor reached out with slow hands and pulled it closer. The warmth from the food made a thin steam rise into the air. The creature inhaled deeply, then ate slowly with care, not like a beast but like someone who hadn't tasted real food in years. Elias watched in silence, unsure of what to say. His training had never prepared him for this. A creature marked for death by the Galactic Council, now sipping broth like a shy child. "I'm not sure what you are," Elias whispered, "but I don't think you deserve to die." Vor finished eating and looked up. Then, slowly, it reached into the dirt again and scratched more letters. This time the message was longer, uneven but readable. "Pain make me mad." Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine. "You went wild." "Because you were hurt," he murmured. Vor didn't move, just stared, eyes filled with a sadness deeper than space itself. No one had ever tried to understand the creature. The council had labeled it dangerous, a thing to be thrown away. But Elias now saw something else. Something wounded, trapped, and alone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of chalk. He slid it inside the cage, and Vor gently took it. "Can you draw?" Elias asked. Vor hesitated, then began to draw slowly. Carefully, he made a symbol, round, swirling, like a spiral sun. Then he pointed to the symbol, then to his chest. "Your home?" Elias guessed. Vor tapped the chalk twice in answer. Elias leaned closer. "Where is it now?" Vor scratched another set of shaky letters. "Gone." A long silence followed. Only the distant hum of the base's engines echoed through the floor. "I'm sorry," Elias whispered. Not even sure why he said it, Vor didn't respond. But he placed the chalk down and pushed the empty container back toward Elias. The gesture meant more than words ever could. Respect, trust, maybe even thanks. Suddenly, the comm in Elias's ear beeped. "Medic Brandt, report to Upper Wing 6, a cold voice said. Elias didn't answer right away. He looked at Vor, who was now curling back into a corner, his massive arms wrapping around his body like a shield. "I have to go," Elias said softly. "But I'll come back, I promise." Vor didn't look up, but gave a slow, small nod. Elias walked back through the halls, his mind racing. Every step he took made him more sure. Vor wasn't a mistake. He was a prisoner of fear, locked away by people who never asked if he could feel. Up in the upper wing, Elias met with Lieutenant Raxa, a strict woman with silver implants and zero patience. "You've been spending extra time near X-13, she said, tapping her data pad. "Medical checks," Elias lied. "Routine. Don't treat it like a pet," she warned, her voice sharp. "It's not a rescue project, it's a dead thing walking." Elias bit his tongue, holding back the words. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. But in his heart, he knew he'd go back again. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling of his room, remembering the way Vor had held the chalk, the way he'd pushed the bowl back. Was this really a creature beyond saving? Or had the council made it that way by locking him in chains? By morning, Elias had made a decision. He packed extra food, medical supplies, and a thermal blanket into his bag. He walked past the cameras with a calm face, hiding everything behind trained eyes. The guards didn't even glance at him. No one ever checked on the cage. Not anymore. He found Vor awake again, waiting in silence. Elias knelt by the bars, this time not as a medic, but as a friend. "You don't have to be alone anymore," he whispered, sliding the bag through. Vor opened it slowly, finding food, bandages, and the soft gray blanket. The creature didn't speak, but it closed its eyes and leaned against the bars. For the first time, it looked peaceful. Elias reached out, and to his surprise, Vor lifted one chained hand. They touched, man and monster, human and alien. No words, just quiet understanding. In the council's eyes, Elias was breaking protocol, but in that cold, forgotten prison, something warm had begun to grow. Not fear, not hatred, but friendship, and that, Elias thought, might be the most dangerous thing of all. Elias checked the hallway cameras again before stepping into the lower tunnel. His hands were shaking slightly as he held the warm container against his chest. Inside was a bowl of soup he'd made himself. Chicken, vegetables, and soft rice. He told the guards he had a routine checkup for the beast. They didn't care. To them, the thing in the cage wasn't worth a second thought. But Elias couldn't stop thinking about those yellow eyes. Not wild, not empty, but alive. And the shaky letters it scratched in the dirt. No, kill me. When he reached the cage, the silence was heavy. Vor was curled in the corner, breathing, slow and shallow. The chains around its arms clanked softly as it stirred. Elias stepped forward, knelt down, and whispered, "I brought something." He slid the container between the bars along with a folded napkin. Vor didn't move at first, but after a moment it uncurled slowly and sat up. Its large hand reached out. Not fast, not wild, but careful. It pulled. The container close, sniffed it once, then dipped a clawed finger into the broth. Elias watched, holding his breath. Vor lifted the liquid to his mouth and tasted it, then took another and another. It was eating like a starving man who didn't want to spill a drop. "I cooked it myself," Elias said quietly. "Don't laugh. I'm a medic, not a chef." Vor looked at him, expression unreadable. Then, very slowly, it pushed the empty cup toward Elias and tapped the floor once. A soft sound, almost like, "Thanks," Elias smiled weakly. "That means you liked it," he said. "Or you're trying to kill me with manners." Vor reached for the chalk from yesterday. It scratched 2 letters into the dirt, M and O. It tried the third. Struggled, then erased it. Elias watched with growing curiosity. More? More, he guessed. Vor gave one small shake of the head. Mouth? Mood? Elias tried again. Vor stared at him, clearly frustrated, then pointed at the food bowl. "More," Elias said, his eyes widening. "You want more?" Vor tapped. The floor again. Twice this time. Elias laughed softly. "All right, buddy. Next time, double portion." He stayed longer that night, sitting beside the cage, telling stories of Earth, of rainy mornings in the mountains, of sweet fruit that grew. By the rivers, he even told Vor about his childhood dog, who used to steal socks and sleep in the kitchen. Vor listened, never interrupting. Now and then, he would draw something beside Elias's boots, small shapes, strange symbols. But Elias didn't disturb them. Finally, Elias stood. "I have to go," he said. "They'll notice if I'm gone. Too long." Vor gave a single nod and turned back to the corner, wrapping the blanket Elias had brought around himself. It didn't fit right, but he held it like something precious. As Elias walked back to the elevator, he felt lighter, but also more afraid. What was he doing? Breaking rules, lying to officers, feeding something the council wanted dead, but how could he not? Vor wasn't a thing. He was someone. In his room that night, Elias couldn't sleep. The words on his screen blurred together as he tried to read the official file again. X-13. Aggressive, non-verbal, non-sentient, caused death of 3 handlers. During transport, order termination pending. But that thing in the cage wasn't non-sentient. He remembered the way Vor had tapped the bowl, the quiet way he listened to stories. He remembered the moment Vor had pushed the empty cup back through the bars, gently, with intention. Monsters didn't say thank you. The next day, Elias brought a spoon, a small plastic one, just to see. Vor didn't need it. He could eat with his claws. But when Elias showed him how to use it, Vor tried clumsily, awkwardly, but he tried. That night, Vor didn't draw a symbol. He drew a face. It was round, with 2 dots for eyes, and a curve underneath like a child's drawing of a smile. Elias stared at it, stunned. He looked up and saw Vor watching him. Then Vor pointed at the smile, then at Elias. "You're trying to say I smile a lot?" Elias asked. Vor nodded slowly. Elias couldn't help but laugh. "Yeah, well, maybe not anymore," he said. "Not after they kill you." The moment the words left his mouth, his chest tightened. He realized he couldn't let that happen. Vor had no one else, no voice, no chance, unless Elias gave it to him. He stood, grabbing the empty bowl and the chalk. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said, voice firm. "And we're going to figure this out, you hear me?" Vor didn't move, but there was a soft sound in his throat. Not a growl, not a roar. Something gentle, something almost like a hum. A sound of trust, of hope. And in that forgotten cell beneath the city, something impossible had started to grow, not just kindness, but friendship. Elias sat on the floor of his bunk, staring at the security logs glowing on his data pad. Every hallway, every guard shift, every blind spot. He studied them like a puzzle he had to solve. Time was running out. Vor's execution was scheduled for the next sunrise. The council's orders were final. No trial, no voice, no second chance. Elias rubbed his face with shaking hands. He had always followed rules, always stayed quiet. But now, one alien inside a dark cage had made him question everything. Vor wasn't a monster. He was wounded, intelligent, and trusting, and Elias couldn't let him die. The plan had to be quiet, clean, fast. No explosions, no blood. Just one human, one alien, and one narrow window to escape. That night, Elias smuggled in a second blanket, a canteen of water, and a thin data chip hidden in his boot. He greeted the guards with his usual tired smile. "Late shift again," he said. "Poor you," one guard muttered, not even looking up. Down in the cage, Vor was already awake, sitting cross-legged. Elias knelt beside the bars and whispered, "We don't have much time." Vor tilted his head, listening closely. "I'm going to get you out," Elias said. "But you'll have to trust me completely." Vor scratched into the dirt. "Danger." "For you." Elias shook his head. "I don't care." He pulled the data chip from his boot and held it up. "This will disable the camera system for 5 minutes," he whispered. "We have to move during that time." Vor tapped the floor once, he understood. Elias slid a thin cutter under the bars. "I can't remove your chains yet," he said. "They're coded to explode if tampered with inside the cage." Vor nodded again. Elias added, "But once we reach the service hall, I can disable them, I swear." Vor shifted quietly, not speaking, not drawing. Instead, he reached through the bars and placed his massive hand gently on Elias's shoulder. It wasn't a gesture of fear or confusion. It was support. Elias nodded, heart pounding. "Tomorrow night," he said. "When the lights flicker twice, that's your signal." Vor sat back, pulling the blanket around him, hiding the cutter in its folds. Elias stood and turned away. But just before leaving, he stopped. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. Vor blinked once, slow and calm. Back in his quarters, Elias typed out a fake request for waste disposal unit cleaning in the maintenance tunnels. He used an old clearance, code he had once used during plague containment drills. The AI system approved it. He now had a valid reason to be near the south wall at exactly 02:17 tomorrow night. But the system had eyes, and not all of them were digital. Unbeknownst to Elias, someone else was watching. A low-ranking communications officer named Drell had noticed Elias's sudden increase in lower deck access. Drell didn't care about justice. He cared about promotions, and he knew that exposing someone breaking council protocol might just be his ticket to a better station. He began watching Elias's logs quietly and carefully. He marked down every visit, every unexplained item carried in and out, and he waited, like a hunter, in the dark. Meanwhile, Elias checked every corridor again and again. He timed the guard routes, memorized the distance between checkpoints. He didn't sleep, didn't eat properly. He just planned. The next night arrived, quiet as snow. Most of the base was asleep, and the few awake were busy with a fake oxygen leak report Elias had filed. He walked down into the lower tunnels wearing a gray maintenance coat. In his pocket, an EMP key to shut off the tracking collar on his wrist, a stolen guard badge he had printed using parts from a broken printer. He stopped outside the cage, looked up at the camera, and pressed a button on his belt. The lights blinked once, twice. Inside the cage, Vor stirred. Elias pressed the code, and the cell door unlocked with a soft hiss. "Let's go," he whispered. Vor stood, towering and wide, but moved like a shadow. Every chain on his arms clinked. But softly, Elias guided him through the tunnel, past crates and pipes and dripping steam. No alarms, no voices, just the sound of boots and hope. But as they neared the exit shaft, something flashed above. A sensor light turned red, then green, then red again. "Wait," Elias whispered, holding out his arm. Footsteps echoed down the tunnel, slow and deliberate. From the far end, Drell appeared, holding a recorder in one hand and a weapon in the other. "Well, well," he smirked. "A medic helping a monster escape." Elias stepped in front of Vor, hands up. "He's not a monster," Elias said, voice steady. "He's not what they told us." "Doesn't matter," Drell said, aiming the gun. "This video will make me a hero." Before he could fire, Vor stepped forward, not to attack but to speak. His voice was dry, low but clear. "Please." "No." Drell froze, eyes wide. The alien just spoke. Elias lunged forward and hit Drell's arm, the gun firing into the wall. Vor moved faster than expected. He didn't hurt Drell, only pushed him aside and grabbed Elias. They ran, slipping into the exit shaft just before the alarms began to scream. Inside the service hatch, Elias collapsed, breathing hard. Vor crouched beside him, whispering something again. This time, Elias understood one word clearly: friend. The alarms were still ringing as Elias and Vor moved through the narrow maintenance tunnel. Red warning lights blinked overhead, casting flickers on the metal walls. Elias's side burned from where he had scraped against a pipe, but there was no time to stop. Vor stayed close, his large frame hunched low to avoid hitting the ceiling. Despite his size, he moved with surprising control. He made no sound except for the soft tapping of his clawed feet on the ground. Elias turned to him and whispered, "We're almost to the hangar." Vor gave a slow nod. His glowing eyes were alert, watching every corner like a hunted animal. The escape path led through an old ventilation shaft, one rarely used. Elias had disabled the motion sensors earlier that day. They slid through the narrow space, Elias crawling first, Vor behind him. After several minutes, they reached the exit, a metal grate just above Hall 9B. Below them were service carts, tall shelves, and a long hallway that led straight to the outer platform. But something felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Elias dropped first, landing behind a cart. He turned and motioned for Vor to follow. As Vor landed, the air shifted. A soft hum filled the hall, the sound of a power cell charging, and then from the shadows stepped a familiar face. Yannick, Elias breathed. His old friend, once a fellow medic, now wore the uniform of a junior security officer. He held a stun rifle pointed at them. "I warned you," Yannick said coldly. "I told you not to get involved with that thing." "He's not a thing," Elias snapped, stepping in front of Vor. "His name is Vor," Yannick sneered. "You risked everything for this?" Elias didn't flinch. "He's not what the council says. He understands, he speaks." Yannick laughed once, harsh and bitter. "You always had a soft heart," he said, "but now it's going to get you killed." He raised the rifle, aiming. At Vor's chest, Vor growled low, a sound more warning than threat. He didn't move, but Elias could feel the tension in his muscles. Elias stepped forward, arms raised. "Please, Yannick, listen, just for 1 minute." Yannick hesitated, but kept the rifle steady. "1 minute," he said. "Then I report you." Elias nodded, voice steady but urgent. "He's not a beast, Yannick," he writes. "He listens. He even saved me from Drell." "You mean the comms guy with a broken wrist?" Yannick snapped. They found him locked in a janitor's closet, screaming about a talking alien. He's not lying, Elias said. Vor talked, with his own voice. Vor stepped forward very slowly. He placed his hand on his chest, then pointed to Elias. Friend, he said, his voice dry but strong. Then he pointed to Yannick. No harm. Yannick's hands shook. He lowered the rifle an inch, eyes flicking between them. You really understand us? He asked. Vor nodded once. Yannick took a step back, confused, overwhelmed. Elias saw it, that crack in the wall of fear. I know you're scared, Elias said softly. But look at him, Yannick. He's not attacking. He just wants to live. Yannick closed his eyes, then handed Elias his ID card. I didn't see you, he whispered. But after this, we're done, Elias. Elias took the card. Thank you. They moved fast, cutting across the hallway and slipping through the emergency access door. Outside, the wind howled across the platform, cold and sharp. The shuttle bay was close, only 100 meters away. But behind them, back in Hall 9B, a voice screamed over the intercom. Subject X-13 has escaped. Repeat, X-13 has escaped. Lethal force authorized. Floodlights exploded to life, bathing the entire corridor in white. Light. Elias grabbed Vor's arm. Run! They sprinted across the platform, alarms blaring above. Guards poured out from side halls. Weapons raised. Elias pulled Yannick's ID and swiped it at the launch gate. A red light blinked, then turned green. The shuttle ramp began to lower. Blaster fire tore through the air, hitting the metal walls around them. Vor grabbed Elias and shielded him with his body. Taking 2 shots to the back, he didn't fall. He roared but didn't fall. Inside the shuttle, Elias slammed his hand on the launch panel. The engines flared, rising dust and smoke in a swirling storm. Just before the doors closed, Elias saw Yannick standing at the far end of the platform. Their eyes met for a second. No words, just understanding. The shuttle lifted off, breaking free from the station. Inside, Elias dragged Vor to a seat. Smoke rose from the burns on his back, but Vor was breathing. You saved me, Elias whispered. Vor coughed once, then smiled just a little. We save each other, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. As the stars opened before them, Elias looked back one last time. He had betrayed the council, betrayed orders, betrayed the rules, but not his heart, not his friend. The shuttle glided quietly through the black sky, far from the noise of alarms and orders. Stars blinked outside the wide front glass, cold and distant. Inside, Elias sat on the floor beside Vor, wrapping gauze around the burned patches on the creature's back. The wounds were deep, but not deadly. Vor didn't make a sound even as Elias tightened the bandages. Only his glowing yellow eyes moved, watching Elias, calm and steady. You should have let me take the hit, Elias whispered, voice heavy with guilt. Vor blinked slowly, then placed a clawed hand gently on Elias's chest. Together, he said in a low voice. Just one word, but it meant everything. Elias leaned against the wall, tired, heart still racing from everything they had left behind. He looked at the stars, then back at Vor. We can't go back, he said. They'll chase us across every system. Vor didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the chalk Elias had left in the supply bin. He drew a shape on the shuttle floor, a crescent moon with 3 small dots above it. Then he tapped it twice. Elias stared at the drawing. Is that your home? Vor nodded once. Is it still there? Elias asked, voice soft. Vor hesitated, then scratched a new word beside the symbol. Burnt. Elias didn't speak, just sat beside him in silence. He couldn't imagine losing an entire world. Family. Language sky. Gone in one council-approved firestorm. After some time, Vor drew another shape, a small circle with 2 stick-like figures beside it. Elias raised a brow. What's that? Vor pointed to the circle, then to the 2 stick figures. Then he tapped Elias, then himself. You mean, this ship is home now? Elias asked, surprised. Vor gave a slow, gentle nod. Elias chuckled bitterly. This is the smallest, worst house I've ever lived in. Vor tilted his head, confused. But, Elias added, maybe. It's also the safest. Suddenly, the warning light on the dash blinked red. Incoming signal detected, said the ship's old voice assistant. Elias jumped up, sliding into the pilot chair. A council ship had pinged their coordinates. They had been found. How? Elias muttered, fingers flying over controls. He checked the signal. Weak. Delayed. Maybe from one of the satellite towers on the outer edge of the station. Still, it meant they had minutes, maybe less. He turned to Vor, eyes fierce. We have to make a choice now. There's a mining belt nearby, he explained, pointing to a blinking dot on the screen. A dozen dead planets and ice fields. No sensors, no patrols, but hard to land. Or, Elias paused, we can go straight to the fringe worlds, risk it, and ask for asylum. Vor stood slowly and walked to the screen. He looked at both routes, then scratched a single word on the metal panel beside it. Hide. Elias nodded. All right, we'll go to the belt. He punched in the coordinates and the shuttle lurched forward. Outside, stars stretched into long silver lines as they entered light jump. For the first time in hours, Elias let out a breath. He looked over at Vor, who was now sitting near the back, quietly staring at the stars through a small side window. Elias joined him, sliding down to sit beside the massive figure. I used to believe the council was right about everything, Elias said quietly. They trained us to follow orders, to treat anything different as dangerous. Vor didn't move, but his eyes turned toward Elias. They never told us the truth. Elias continued. They never said you were capable of kindness. Vor lifted his hand and gently touched the small medallion around Elias's neck, an old earth symbol for healing. Then he said, You changed. Elias smiled sadly. You changed me. The ship exited jump, landing just outside the ice ring of a shattered moon. The place was silent, forgotten, full of broken rock and thick white fog. Perfect for hiding, Elias landed the ship near a cliff wall where old mining tunnels had collapsed. He turned off all outside lights, disabled the beacon, and powered down the engine. Then he joined Vor in the back, near the heat panel, where it was warm and still. They sat together, sharing silence. Not the silence of fear, but of survival, of peace. Elias offered a protein bar. Vor sniffed it once, wrinkled his nose, and passed it back. Elias laughed. Yeah, tastes like rubber. The two of them sat against the panel as the ship cooled and the stars spun slowly above. The council still searched, still hunted, but in that small, hidden corner of space they couldn't reach them yet. Elias leaned his head against Vor's shoulder, eyelids heavy. Tomorrow, he whispered, we figure out what comes next. Vor didn't answer but placed one strong arm around Elias's back, not to hold him captive but to let him rest. The frozen moon remained silent as days passed. The ship, half buried under falling ice and dust, blended into the cliffs like it had always been there. Inside, the air was warm, the lights were low, and two souls, one human, one alien, lived. Quietly, Elias repaired the heating core and reprogrammed the food replicator. The meals weren't great, thick gray bread and salty broth, but they were enough. Vor made small changes too. He carved symbols onto the walls with his claws, symbols of his lost world, his people. Each mark told a piece of a story that had once been wiped out. They did not talk much, but they didn't need to. Trust had already been built in silence. Sometimes Elias would wake in the middle of the night and find Vor staring out the window watching the stars, not in fear but in longing for a home that no longer existed. One morning, Elias opened the hatch and stepped outside. The air was sharp and dry but breathable for short periods. He climbed a nearby ridge. To adjust the signal scrambler he had rigged, below the ship looked like a forgotten relic, half hidden in snow, safe, but lonely. As he walked back, he spotted something strange near the ship's side. Tracks. small ones, not from Vor or himself. He knelt and brushed the snow aside. More tracks, then a shape, a young alien creature, no taller than his waist, trembling and weak. It looked up at him with wide, glowing blue eyes, then collapsed. Vor, Elias shouted as he carried the small body inside. Vor rushed forward and stared at the creature, stunned. He fell to his knees and touched the child's face gently. "Thari," he whispered, voice cracking. Elias stared at him. "You know her?" Vor nodded slowly. "My sister's daughter." "She lived?" Elias asked, shocked. Vor nodded again, eyes shining. "Hid her. Before fire came." Elias quickly scanned the girl, malnourished, dehydrated, weak but alive. He wrapped her in blankets and poured warm broth into a small cup. The girl stirred, her eyes fluttered open, and she reached for Vor's hand. "Uncle," she whispered in a broken voice. Vor made a deep, soft sound. Not a growl, but something close to weeping. From that moment, everything changed. The ship was no longer a hiding place. It became a home. Elias repaired an old pod and turned it into a sleeping chamber for the girl. Vor painted the inside with stars and moons, using crushed berries and colored minerals from outside the cave. The little one began to speak more each day. Not in council standard, but in her people's tongue, and Vor taught Elias a few simple words. One of them was Grek, which meant guardian. The girl called Elias Grek. At first it made him laugh, but later it made his chest feel warm. Weeks passed, then months, and though they still lived in hiding, peace grew around them. Elias even planted a tiny garden inside a glass chamber using seeds from his pack. The first green sprout appeared on the 50th day. He showed it to Vor like it was a miracle. One night, as they all sat near the heater, the girl curled up between them. Vor asked, "Why, save me?" Elias looked at him, surprised. "You were kind," Elias answered. "You were alone, hurting, but you didn't harm me." Vor lowered his head. "Others would not do the same." "Then they're not like me," Elias said, placing a hand on Vor's arm. "And I'm glad I'm not like them." Outside, a meteor passed across the sky, its light dancing over the cliffside like a flame. The girl pointed at it and whispered something in her language. Vor translated softly. "She says, 'Stars are watching us.'" Far away, the council continued spreading their version of the story, that X-13 had escaped, that a traitor human had vanished with it, but rumors began to rise in fringe stations and broken colonies, whispers of a creature that painted stars, of a girl who spoke 2 languages, and a human with healing hands who had fed a beast with bread instead of bullets. No one could find them, no one could prove it, but in the quiet places of the galaxy, people began telling the story, not of a monster but of a friend. Years later, a traveler would discover the cave ship, long empty, but filled with markings and gentle drawings. A garden had grown over the roof, wild and green, and on the wall, carved deeply into the steel, were the final words of Elias Brandt. "He was never a beast. He was a soul in chains, and I simply set him free."